Hello everyone, this is Bornali Kolita, Assistant Professor in the Department of Political Science, Rangia College, Assam. This video has specifically dealt with the theory of private property of John Locke. As we all know that John Locke is the second social contractualist in the tradition of the social contract theory. He is also regarded as the father of classical liberalism because he started with all the premises of classical liberalism, that is, all men are free, equal and rational, and he also ended with the principles of classical liberalism, that is, a constitutional monarchy. So from this perspective, he can be regarded as the father of the classical liberalism. The most important work of John Locke is the two treatises of government. Now we have moved forwarded towards the conception of private property according to John Locke. Before conceptualizing private property in the viewpoints of John Locke, we must have to mention that according to John Locke, people enjoy three important natural rights in the state of nature. The first one is the right to life, the second one is the right to liberty, and the third one is the right to property. So, in other words, right to property is one of the important natural rights that people enjoy in the state of nature. Now, how John Locke has conceptualized private property? According to John Locke, in order to preserve their life, people must have property. Locke has also mentioned that this property should be private property. So Locke says that God has given all the natural resources to all the individuals in common, and this is the concept of common property. But if an individual mixes his or her individual labor power with the natural resources, then it can be regarded as the private property. Now, Locke has mentioned certain limitations on the right to private property in the state of nature. In this regard, we can find three limitations according to John Locke. The first limitation regarding the acquisition of private property in the state of nature is that in order to acquire private property, one must have to mix his or her individual labor power with the natural resources. So only that amount of power can be acquired by an individual which results from one's individual labor power. Secondly, the second limitation regarding the acquisition of private property is the spoilage system, because all the natural resources are in the form of raw material, and therefore these natural resources become spoiled at one time, and therefore Locke has mentioned that the spoilage system as the second limitation on the right to private property of the individuals in the state of nature. Thirdly, leave as enough and as good for others. We have already mentioned that God has given all the natural resources to all the individuals equally. So, every individual has equal right upon all the natural resources. So while using the natural resources, an individual should always take into care the rights of others upon the natural resources, and therefore one individual should always live as enough and as good for others from the natural resources. So these are the limitations which have been mentioned by John Locke on the acquisition of private property in the state of nature. Accordingly, Locke has given the concept of limited property in the state of nature. But although he mentioned about the concept of limited property, but immediately he changed his idea of limited property to unlimited property, and he also provided certain means or certain ways to acquire unlimited property. The first means through which one individual can acquire unlimited property is that through buying others' labor power. So Locke has mentioned that one individual can acquire only that amount of private property which results from one's own labor. But if an individual uses the labor power of other individuals, then that particular individual can acquire maximum amount or unlimited amount of private property. So accordingly, Locke has mentioned that through buying others' labor power, one individual can acquire unlimited amount of private property. The second way through which one can acquire unlimited property is when money becomes the medium of exchange. So Locke has mentioned, he has already mentioned that spoilage limitation is the second limitation on the acquisition of private property. But when money becomes the medium of exchange, then this spoilage limitation can be refuted, because money is such a thing which never spoils or which never becomes spoiled. So through these two ways or these two means, one individual can acquire unlimited property in the state of nature. So accordingly, John Locke has changed his idea of limited property to unlimited property. In this context, Locke says that the theory of private property will create a class society. But although he mentioned about the term class society, but he said that he had used the term equality in political aspect. It doesn't mean economic equality. Now we have moved forward towards the criticism part. Like all other theories of the other political thinkers, the theory of private property is also not free from criticism. So the first criticism against the theory of private property is that private property leads to class conflict. So according to the critics, the theory of private property will lead towards a class society. So in a class society, there will be two classes. One is the rich and the another one is the poor. So who will take more initiatives, who are more enthusiastic, they will become rich, and the rest of the people will remain as the poor. So accordingly, there will be the creation of inequality in the class society, and it will lead to class conflict. So the first criticism against the theory of private property is that it will lead to a class society where there will be class conflict between the rich class and the poor class. Secondly, C.B. Macpherson has criticized John Locke's theory of private property. C.B. Macpherson has regarded Locke as the bourgeois political thinker because Locke has mentioned about a class society where there will be two classes, the rich and the poor. And according to C.B. Macpherson, a class society will always protect the interests of the rich class. So, from this perspective, C.B. Macpherson has considered John Locke as the bourgeois political thinker. So, accordingly, lots of criticisms have been put forwarded against the theory of private property of John Locke. But in spite of all these criticisms, we cannot ignore the importance of the theory of private property of John Locke. So this is all about the theory of private property of John Locke. Hope you all have understood. Thank you.